Hello and welcome to the JTrain podcast. This is JTrain Jared Freid coming to you live from Delray Beach, Florida. That's right. Every Wednesday is a chit chat Wednesday where I sit down with a comedian, a friend, an expert. So far, I got 1 out of 3. We are just meeting now. So we'll be friends by the end of the episode, I'm sure. But they are an expert in finance, or as your douchiest finance friend calls it, finance. They're on social media. They are at the Femme Fatale, at the Fiscal Femme. I was going to ask you about that. Okay, Ashley Feinstein Gerstley, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It is so good to see you. Fiscal Femme. I get femme fatale. I think, like, do you have people that are like that name to me, like, is like, you know, like dom, like porn ridden? Was that like on purpose? Do you get that a lot? Am I just a weirdo for bringing that up 5 seconds into meeting you? But I see Fiscal Femme and I'm like, there's something naughty here.
So it's actually pretty common for people to say femme fatale, but it didn't really have a naughty backstory. I basically was sharing about my own money journey, trying to come up with a name for the blog. And one of my friends spoke French and she said femme meant woman. And so I'm like, oh, the fiscal woman, but it has the alliteration. So, but if it adds that intrigue, I'm in.
There was like
That's
a
great.
time, I think it was Slutty Puffin who told me that, like, at a certain time, the thing to do if you were going to like start a social media account was to have something recognizable and then something like a swear, like fuck Jerry, Slutty Puffin. Like, these accounts did well. So I was like, but Fiscal Femme, again, it does roll off the tongue, but there's something there. I'm like, is this going to, like, because you never know. Like, you see people on social media and they're like, I'm going to do finance, but sexy. And you're like, okay, sure. I guess we're gonna magic school bus this. They're gonna make it like more edible, like this is like the way the world works.
Making it more palatable or
And
exciting.
that's kind of your drive. So you are a CFP. Now, I used to sell life insurance and annuities, so I have some familiarity. The CFP designation, would you say that, like, that's the only person that should give financial advice? Would you say that, like, anything below a CFP, like, you're talking to just an armchair quarterback? This isn't someone, like, the designation's important. I know that.
Well, I actually just got it in the last few years. And the reason I didn't get any certifications is I wanted to make it approachable. Like, if I can do this, you can too. And so I didn't want all these letters after my name or to make it seem out of reach. But then for my last book, when I interviewed people, I started screening for the CFP because that made me feel comfortable. I know there's a lot there with first the education, but also like the fiduciary duty that you have to recommend what's in people's best interest. So I'm like, if I'm screening for this, then I probably
If I
should get
want it,
this. But for
yeah.
a while, honestly, it was based on yeah. Yeah, but basically for a long time, it was based on just my experience with helping people with my own journey. And so I think it's important with finance to understand where the incentives are and how people are getting paid. I think that's the biggest thing for taking advice. But of course, I'm a big fan of the credential.
So for those listening or watching on YouTube, Ashley's the author of Financial Adulting, The 30-Day Money Cleanse. We talk a lot about dating and relationships. What's the biggest problem people have with money? Like, if there's one thing that you're like, this is everyone's problem. I mean, how old are you? How old are you? And, like, because I'm trying to figure out where you are around where I am,
I'm 39. I'm an
So you and
elder
I are around the
millennial.
same age. I'm a little older. So, like, what do you think people around our age are, like, dealing with? Like, what is, like, the number one thing that they're messing up or need to do better or, like, stressing them out?
So I would say the most common thing I see is that we tend to polarize each other in relationships. And so even if we might be similar, like a saver and a saver or a spender and a spender, when we get together, the saver becomes more savvy, the spender becomes more spendy, and it creates stress in the relationship. Something I have everyone in relationships do, especially as they become more serious, is have money parties together where you set aside time, sit down, deal with any of that money stuff that in a place where you can set an intention to be compassionate and listen and non-judgmental. So I think that's a really great habit to get into, and really communication is so important because and understanding where the other person is coming
What's the money
from
party? What
when it
do
comes to
how do
money,
you
because there's
how do
so
you
much
throw a
behind it.
money
It's not
party? How does that oh, that this is your thing, money party. What because I'm like I've dated people and I'm
I love
like
money parties.
when I'm in starting to date someone, like money doesn't even come up. Like it's almost like we live in a fantasy world. Like I'm paying for every date, but of course that's not how I see it going forever. Like I don't see us like this is all kind of like it's all kind of just it's not even reality for the first, I would say, maybe 6 months for me, and for others, maybe it's sooner, maybe it's later.
Definitely, and I understand the idea that it's a fantasy world, but there are some hints. Like, you can see how someone tips or how they talk about money or the types of places they choose. You might get some hints into their financial viewpoint, but the money party essentially is setting aside time. I like to have them every month. If you have them more often, they could be shorter, and I make them fun. I have a playlist with songs that pump me up about money. I'm happy to share it, and I get my PJs, I have a cup of tea. I know some people like to go out after, like, have a date night after. They'll have an adult beverage. I just recommend drinking less at the beginning so that you don't just give up on
Mhm.
your money party. And you just look at your spending, check in on your goals, have conversations, if especially once you start to have joint expenses, like, "Oh my god, why is the Amex so high?" Like, let's look into it now versus, like, yelling at someone when they're walking out the door,
Right.
you know? So it prevents that. It creates this, like, safer space for
So what
talking
would
about
you do?
money.
Like, give us let's play out the night. You and I are gonna have a money party. We planned it for Friday night. We have a dinner set up for 8. What are you bringing? Like, what do you know, let's say, like, you and I are dating. We're 3 months in. Is that too early? Is that too late? Is it 6 months in? Is it we're a year in? Like, I guess age would matter. Like, if I'm dating someone at 40, like, I'm gonna talk about money way sooner than I would be if I was at 23. Like, that's not even gonna be, like, a thought in my mind. But, like, how does this go down? Like, Friday night, we have dinner, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a money party before. How would you bring this up to a partner, and what would you do, and what would you bring? If hair thinning has started happening to you, but you're totally stuck on what to do next, let me help you out. Give Nutrafol a try. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. I have never tried Nutrafol. My mom loves it, and my mom's not an easy customer. She's not gonna keep reusing something that she doesn't find value in, and she does find value in Nutrafol. She loves it. She's had thicker hair because of it, and if I'm out there with hair insecurities, there's all these options that involve drugs and surgeries. I think Nutrafol is your best first bet. Like, let's take a shot here. And I just know that my mom's had great experience with it. Her hair looks great, and Nutrafol is formulated by physicians, and she keeps ordering it. She keeps bothering me. I'm like her pusher. Nutrafol is formulated by physicians, clinically tested and dermatologist recommended, so it's checking all the boxes. You can feel great about what you're putting into your body since Nutrafol hair growth supplements are backed by peer-reviewed studies and NSF content certified, the gold standard and third-party certification for supplements. That is something that's great as far as getting something that isn't a prescription and it's not a surgery. Like, this is the move. Make sure you pick auto deliveries to keep yourself on track. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping at Nutrafol.com. Enter the promo code FEATHER. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code FEATHER. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code FEATHER.
Such a great question. So I think it really depends on where you are in the relationship. And it could be 3 months in, but super serious, 3 months in, not as serious. So it really depends on, like, I think, let's say you're planning a trip together and there's going to be some combined finance thing for that, or you're going to a wedding. Like, that could be a hint that it's time to start having this type of conversation. You can have a money party. Once you start having shared expenses, that's when you want to have a money party. But even before that, so this is, it's personal preference, but you can even have money parties with friends. So
So
and
I
to
like
bring
the
them
idea.
in, a great way to do that is to start doing it
I'm sorry to
yourself.
interrupt because I like the idea of like how, I like the
No.
idea of like what brings this up. And like like, okay, so we have a wedding together is like a really good way, like a good like kind of like, because I the hardest part is bringing these things up. Like the hardest part is like it's not having the money party. It's like it's being vulnerable enough to like present it. So it's like, hey, we're going to a wedding next month. This is our first trip together. There's going to be money stuff going on. I just heard this podcast where they talked about a money party. Would you be up for that? Is that kind of like a good way to bring it up? Like, and I like the idea of doing it with friends, like bachelorette party. Like, hey, we have this big trip coming up. There's money stuff that I'm just like, it's all awkward. Even calling it awkward might help. Like I think like sometimes I'm like I
Yes.
need the first sentence, but I can do the rest. So is this when you would bring it up? You'd say like, okay, we're going to this wedding. You invited me, but like there's money things at hand. I hate having this just unsaid. Can we have a money party?
Yes, and I think there's so much here. I think we don't need to, like, show them our balances or, like, say, "This is how much debt I have." You can wade into that slowly, But it's more like, "Hey, how are we gonna divide the expenses for the wedding? Like, who's paying for what? Like, can we talk?" And I love the idea of naming things that feel awkward to just get that out there. But even with the friends, for example, if you don't even have shared expenses, just to say, "Hey, I have money goals." Like, and then they'll say, "I do too." Like, let's sit down and track our expenses completely separately. Just the body doubling itself has you do it, show up, build that habit. And then when someone sees you're thriving financially, it will inspire them to kind of join in with you. So even if you don't have anything joint, you could have this ritual where you track your own money and that comes up in a conversation like, this is something I do. It helps me with my goals. Or, hey, I really want to take a trip. So I'm saving money. Like, you can bring up the conversation in so many different ways and aren't like, here's my credit card debt, or this is how much I earn. That feels so much less awkward. Or like, oh my gosh, growing up, my family was like this with money. What was your family like with money? So like easing in or wading into these money conversations in a way that doesn't feel like you're just like getting naked with your money on the first day.
Right. I'm trying to think like like if I just think, I don't know when I would bring this up or even if I would, like, if I'm being honest, like, it's like a hard, and I think like sometimes, I think from the male side of things, it's like, that's kind of your, like, it's like showing, your boobs a little bit. Like, it's like, it's like a little, like, it's like, here's the thing that maybe, like, I'm not saying I've never thought of myself as like, getting someone, a woman because they thought I was like this rich guy. Like that's not who I am. But the the idea that like when you pay for a day, you're like, look it, I can do this. And then there's like the reality of it is like, yeah, I don't like to spend $200 on a dinner every night of the week. Like that's not like I don't have all the money in the world. I can't do that. So then you have to like become the real naked, wet version. You're like the wet rat version of you. And like so I'm like trying to think of like when, like I don't even know the first thing to
Yes.
show. What would be the first thing you'd show a partner that you started dating?
Well, curious for you, like on dates, are there any conversations that come up around money?
See,
Like, even like, "This is what I want." Like, even I think a lot of it is future based, like, what you want in
right,
life. Like, do you want like, when you're talking about how many kids, that's a money
right.
conversation. When you're talking about, like, where you wanna live, that's kind of money.
Yeah, I think, And I agree with you. I think a lot of the, like, stuff on a like, a first date, you're talking about money whether you like it or not. Like, here's where I went to school, here's where I grew up, here's what my parents, do or did, or here's what I do. Like, you can all again, I think that's, like, the hard part about this is so many assumptions are made, like, you kinda, like, go based on your own emotional state and what you feel about all these informational tidbits. So, like, when I say, like, "Oh, I would love 2 kids," I guess I never think of that as, like, I'm too cheap for a third, but, like, I guess that is part of why I want 2 kids. I think a 3rd kid would be, like, so expensive. I also grew up with a brother and not we didn't have 3 kids in the family, so, like, that's part of it. I
Yes.
get it's pretty layered,
Same.
like, I guess, like
It's so
right.
layered. And, a lot of couples will say, "I pay for the wedding if it's my friend, you pay for the wedding if it's your friend." Even just let's say you're invited to a wedding and you're bringing someone, you could even say, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking. How does that sound to you?"
Right.
And that's one money
Is
conversation
is
right
there a
there.
money red flag in dating? Is there something that someone does or says that you're like, "Just stay away from this guy or this woman," or whatever?
I get a lot of questions about that, like, if someone is not good with money, should you not date them, or is that, get rid of them? I think the biggest thing is this willingness to learn and get better at it. We have so much working against us when it comes to money, so most of us aren't just, like, off the bat thriving, and if we aren't, that is okay, but if we're not willing to learn, if we're not willing to talk about it, if someone's like, "Oh, you're not part of that conversation," or, making you feel stupid about talking about money. I think those are red flags, like the way you're able to communicate about it. Also, probably some control issues around money. If there's money used in a way to manipulate you, that would be a red flag that I'd see. But generally, if someone has a low credit score, for example, that can happen for so many reasons and that sticks with you for many years. I would say as long as they're interested in improving in that area, then that wouldn't be a
What
red flag
is
for
the
me.
number one fight couples are having about money? Like, what's the thing? Is it like, "I want this," and they don't wanna spend this? Or, like, what's the one argument that people are just generally having?
I would say probably
Right.
spending, like, valuing spending money on different things or spending versus saving, uh, my husband and he, like, values buying things, I value experiences, so, there's judgment on what we're spending our money on. Um, in another one we have and I think this one can be common too, is, like, when do you pay to make things more convenient, and when do you do it yourself and save money?
That's a great way of putting it.
That's one that we're
Yeah,
communicating about constantly, but I
because you don't really hear it put
yeah.
that way as, like, because like, okay, I'm gonna get the Uber as opposed to taking the subway, which is, like, a very New York version of that, but, like, I'm gonna get, the lay flat seat as opposed to economy class because we can have a great trip and it's gonna make everyone feel better day 1 instead of having, being groggy or whatever. Like, I guess that's, like, I guess you're making it's not spend or don't spend, it's spend or spend less, you know?
Right, and ours the one I wrote about recently was making tuna salad or egg salad versus buying it. It's like the very Jewish bagel
Yeah.
version, but it was like not o it was like, d it's easy to make, but, like, do we have time, and what are we not doing that during that time that we're making it, and so, yes, there's a lot of different situations, and someone might be, pay for like, I feel like he would be pay for the upgrade, but not pay for the bagel and pay for the tuna and the egg salad, so you could be both depending on the
That's the hard
situation.
part, I think, in dating and money is, like, it is crazy what our emotional state is for different types of spending, and if you're with someone, they kinda, like, call you on your hypocrisies, and you're like, "Yeah, that's called being a human," but, like and then you become embarrassed of it, so you hide it. Like, if I'm, like, thinking out loud a little bit, like, that is, like, such a big point of contention, like, with dating, it's like, "Well, you'll spend on this, but you won't spend on that? Like, this is where you're cheap?" And it's like, I don't know if I would hope I wouldn't, like, use that I guess it can become weaponized if you have bigger problems in the relationship. Like, that's like a and, like, that's okay. I do things and I'm like, "There's no way I'd spend money on that," and then there's, like, other things I'm like, I you'd be like, "Wait, you have a hat from Kimo Sabe that costs, a rent payment? What the hell are you talking about?" But that doesn't mean I just spend on everything, you know?
Yes, and it honestly leads to conversation. It's about what's important to you, and it's also one of the reasons, like, when people combine finances, I recommend having just your own pool of spending money, like, here's our goal or joint expense money, and then we each have, like, this much amount of money to spend on whatever, and you can't judge it. Like, I get to do what I do, you get to do what you do, because it helps with that, and it is like, if you can tease each other and laugh about it, but really hone in on, "Hey, this hat was really important to me. It brings me so much joy," then that is a productive conversation. Another few prompts that I think are really helpful that you don't have to do on the first date or anything, but just your first money memory, that's a big one because if we remember it, it had an impact, and that might be driving, your fear of whatever it is. How your family grew up with money, like, if your family struggled with money or if they had a lot and lost it, for example, you might have this extra need to hoard it and save it. And if your partner understands where that's coming from, they can have more compassion than if it's just like, why are you so stingy with these
Right.
things? And then also just like your biggest fear, because a lot of times our biggest money fear is not very likely to happen. But if they know, again, where that stress is coming from, it just compassion, I think, is a big thing here in these
It's a
conversations with a
great
partner.
point. I mean, to get personal, like, I come from, a privileged background where, like, my family, it was like there were no real gifts. It wasn't like, "Wait for your birthday," but, like, if you need it, go get it. But, like, also, money was also a topic of conversation with, like, you're not gonna get something stupid like a Kimo Sabe hat. Like, that would be, like, looked down upon and frowned upon. But, like, my mom was a spender, my dad's a saver. It is and in a lot of their contention would be about the differences, the nature versus nurture of it all, that they're from 2 different, kinda, like, viewpoints on that. But, like, the money fear, like, I guess a lot of my fears for relationships would connect to, like, money fears. My fear would be, like, comedy just, my bookings going dry and nothing happening for me, and now I have no income, and when I am on my own, like a single guy, I can, rationalize that in the mirror, like, when you're in a relationship, you're like, "Hey, no shows this month, and also I'm gonna wake up and do a podcast where I'm giggling and laughing for an hour." Like, that's a hard thing to tell a partner, with no income coming in, like, but the giggling might pay off, like, my insecurities would all in a relationship would stem from that. It would help me to, like, probably tell someone that I was dating those things.
And I think too, then if let's say you get rejected for a gig or there's a big expense that month, if there's heightened stress around it or you have a heightened reaction, they would know where that's coming from. They're like, and have some compassion. Like, this is his fear that there's no money ever coming
Right.
in, from this career. And that's why this is heightened versus like, why is he being a jerk about
Right. I mean,
this?
I get so many emails from women being like, "Why won't this guy says he's not ready for a relationship?" And, and then they'll be like, "He's this age. He's this, what is he when is he ever going to be ready?" And the joke is to be made of like a man being 80 saying like, "Yeah, I'm just not ready for a relationship." Like, that joke is to be made. Like, I agree with the joke. But if you really wanna get into it with the person you're dating, like, and see where that's coming from, I always believe that's from, like, money, anxieties and career anxieties and not from, like, "I'm just trying to bang," Like, I don't it always seems, a little bit small-minded to be like, "Yeah, he's just looking to be with a bunch of women," which does exist, but I don't think in most of these cases, you know what I mean? Do you hear that from people where they're like
Yes.
You hear from people that like relationships are
Definitely where these
ending because of these things like money, thoughts, and career?
That's a great question if they're ending from it, but I have definitely heard not feeling ready financially to be
Mm.
in a relationship. I think it's interesting when in a partnership, your money, you're both contributing to the money, and so there can be like taking turns in careers almost. Like for example, I would say that in my relationship, I have the giggle
Yeah.
job, right? I'm on a call with you right now giggling. And then my husband's job is like the one that has the life insurance and the steady income. And so I think there are turns for taking risks in careers. Not to say you can have a giggle job that has steady income and things are happening and you feel confident in that income. But if someone's going out and taking a risk, the other person might need to be more stable during that time, especially once there's a lot of shared expenses like
Mhm.
kids or something in the mix. So I can totally see that feeling of wanting to have things together before committing to someone, but also at the same time, if something feels really right or you're, that is the person you want to spend your life with, like you can figure it out. So,
So
um, yeah, but I've definitely seen breakups from like financial infidelity, from people lying about things and finding out about things, especially when they're finding out and no one came clean. And then also just like people who are financially abusive or
what's financial
make them just feel
abusive?
really uncomfortable financially because they're financially abusive is there's like 99% of abuse cases include financial abuse, or 99% of domestic violence cases include financial abuse, but it's essentially like limiting funds for people or like spending out of vengeance, like building some credit card debt in someone's name, like really terrible things like that, but using it to manipulate and hurt
I
people.
I I guess I've never heard it spoken about that way, but, like, you do hear the one you hear, like, I guess the financial abuse that I would hear about is, like, this person, racked up debt and then left me with the debt. Like, that's, like, a pretty common form of that, right?
Yes.
I so
Yes. And and to the and when it's
so I
intentional.
I I have a question, then I'm gonna get to some listener questions because we have 2 emails from listeners on the subject of finance and dating. How do you, like I always hear the shared expenses. What would be this, like, just like nuts and bolts? Is it like, here we have this credit card that goes to the same place? Like, do you put do you both put 10,000 into a cash account? Like, I just 10,000 out of the air, but like, like, how does it work like structurally? And because we always hear about shared finances, then I'm like, I have a little bit like, a very small amount of like financial knowledge and how my accounts are set up, but like, is it like, how would you do it?
So you can go 2 ends there and then everything in between. So there's like fully combined, everything's together, and then there's like everything separate and you like Venmo each other. And there are people who do that too. And I think it depends on your financial history and trust and what you saw growing up that impacts your ability or wanting to share accounts. And then somewhere in between is where I've seen the most common and the most success. So it's like you have a joint account for expenses. You decide how much each person contributes to that account. It could be split evenly. It could be based on a percentage of their income. Like this one earns double, so they contribute double. But if maybe they have double, but they have a big student loan payment. So maybe you reduce that a little bit. But you decide what each person contributes to the joint, and then you can have your separate. Um, and essentially, when you have a business, like I have a business, and so I have my own finances for the business and then the joint account with my partner. So really any way in between, but I think the key is talking about it and if there is stress or something that feels like it's not working or not fair, like I feel like I'm really like trying really hard to put this amount in and it's you have making more money and it's easy for you, like really speaking up and trying to adjust the system so that there's not resentment building. If one person is just working in the home, for example, you wanna make sure they have access to funds versus having to ask a partner, like, "I need money, can you transfer it over?" Because this creates, like, this power dynamic that does not
Mm.
feel good. So I think it's very personal, but those are kind of the different ways, like going all in, keeping it separate, and just transferring things over. You could even keep it separate and say, Venmo me for the rent, I'll cover utilities, you cover cable, whatever it is.
Yeah,
And then in between where you have some joint and or that one joint, and you can have a joint credit card too, like you mentioned, so that any like groceries go on there and then the joint account
it's
pays it.
funny, I'm, like, thinking about this, like, as you're talking about it, I'm like, "Man, I would have to, like, change my lifestyle," like, the way I spend, the way I, like, put my money together, like, this would be, like, a change of, like, how I pay for things, like, and all of that I do quietly, like, I don't really, like I'm not as organized as probably the most organized person, but I'm not, like, a total mess, but I'm not sitting there being like, "Okay, it is bill day. Let me just take the stuff in my inbox and put it to my outbox." Like, I don't know. Like, I it is funny that, like, I think a lot of the insecurity, I personalize everything because I'm like, if I'm dealing with it, I'm sure the listeners or the viewers are dealing with it. But I'm like, man, it would be, I would have to say so much more out loud than I normally have to say, if that makes any sense.
And there are things like I've put in place with couples that work really well, like you buy whatever you buy, but if it's over a certain amount and it's not, and this is, once you're combined, right? Like once you're married, but if it's over this amount, we talk
Mm,
about it. Just like so a Peloton's not showing up at the door and the other person's like, what happened here? But then for like the everyday choices, like you want to grab your lunch, you want to buy something small, like you decide that threshold at which you guys want to confer. And it doesn't mean you're asking permission, just to talk
mm.
about it so that they're not, like, big stressors and surprises. But I'm curious for you, like, in your example of things having to change so much, is it which part of it would be the biggest
Well,
shift for you? The
I
talking
would just
about it?
have to be, like, incredibly open about it. Like, I mean, like, I have my own business too. I have an LLC for this whole, but I called it the Wizard of Oz Inc. Like, it's like everything I do is stupid, but then there's, like, real consequences and real business that goes into it. So it's like, I giggle every time I see the Wizard of Oz Inc. on, like, a check. Like, I'm like, "That's stupid." But then it's like, and then I have, like, some things are direct deposit, some things are not. Some, I pay, I do a lot of, like, everything I do is my business. So when I use a credit card, it's a business expense. Like, you know, I'm making videos from everywhere. I'm doing stand up and writing from everywhere. So a lot of, like, my lifestyle comes out of, it's just like so I'm like, I don't know, a lot of it is like, and I think of this a lot with my career, especially doing this, like, alternative thing, as you're doing something, pretty alternative, is like, you have to go, "This is weird, and this is how I do it." Like, and I have that a lot with work stuff generally, like,
Yes.
"Hey, I have to go do this free open mic so that I can work on a 7-minute set that won't get me paid, but will get me looked at by people who could pay me one day." So it's like, you really have to be very understanding of, like, this, like, non-real currency, like this, like, there's a name for it. I'm searching for it. There's a financial term for, like,
Well, to me, that's marketing,
right,
right? That's like a form of marketing. Also, I think the Wizard of Oz thing is amazing, and I think it doesn't have to be
right.
serious. Like that, just because it's fun and funny doesn't mean it's not a great setup. So I think laughing every time and like having that joy every time you see your tax return or see like a check come in is
A lot of
wonderful.
comics have that. Like, it is a fun pastime to find out comedians' business names because they're all weird. Everyone has a weird one. Okay, so we're here at the Fiscal
Great.
Femme. Go follow. I'm so happy Ashley's here. This is fantastic. We have an email. Let's do an email. I like the subject is, "Does my husband owe me money?" Which is a fun subject. Okay, you
Mm,
ready? "We've been
yes.
married 3.5 years. We have 2 kids together, and he has a son from a previous marriage. Our finances are separate. He Venmos me monthly for his share of the bills, and I pay everything. We just went to Portugal with his family. Before the trip, we agreed to each bring $500. I sent him $250 for my half, and his parents gave us 800 euros. While there, I barely spent anything, a couple cheap souvenirs for the girls and one activity. He, on the other hand, spent way more: nightly food at feasts, a tattoo, a bracelet, a hat, a soccer ball for his son, even a gift for his son's mother. Okay. We came home with just over €1,000. He exchanged it and deposited into his account. When I asked what he planned to do with it, he said pay off our joint credit card, which I'd already paid my half of. Buy school shoes for his son and maybe fall clothes for the girls. I told him I wanted to place a $100 or a $120 order for the girls, and he said no because they don't need it right now. Later, I asked if he could send me money for shoes I bought myself, and he just laughed. So my question is, shouldn't some of that money come to me? I don't feel entitled to the €800 from his parents, but since we came back with $1,000, I think at least 100 will make things fair. The bigger issue is we keep running into the situations like this because our finances are separate, even though we make similar incomes and have similar debt. Thanks for all your help. So I have the text exchange, and let me read the text between the two. Should we bring our own money? I just realized my parents are staying an extra week, so I don't want to rely on them solely. She writes, probably. I don't want to go buy a ton though. Stickers for the girls, a shirt for or hat for Jordan, and then just what we eat and what we do for activities. I'm not trying to buy a ton of souvenirs or toys or anything. He writes back $500, and she writes, 500 is fine. Do you want me to Venmo you 250 and you can do the exchange? So this is where we stand, Ashley. It sounds a little bizarre to me, this whole scenario. What would your thoughts be on this?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts. So it sounds like, so for, I think from his perspective, he views it as like this was the cost of the
Mm,
trip and that's the end of it. Whereas she's still budgeted on the trip, thinking like I didn't spend it all. Something else I noticed with, I think it was the shoes that the girls needed. A lot of times, like kid expenses become the mom's problem, I've noticed. And it's not viewed as like a joint couple problem. It's like, oh, the mom's so spendy because she needs to go back to school shopping for the
right, like the
kids. And I think
kids need
because there's often that labor
it's
that,
as if the kids you're basically, I would say
yes,
from the male point of view, it's like you're putting your needs of fashion and keeping up with the Joneses on our kids, whereas I wouldn't necessarily need that. I could have them at school with burlap sacks on their feet, and it wouldn't be an embarrassment to me, which isn't fair. I'm just I understand the argument, but it
right.
is not correct. Like that's like, and we're not saying get the kids Gucci
You know what it
sandals.
reminds me of is Eve Rodsky has. Right, right, and I think there's, like, a minimum, like, in Fair Play, Eve Rodsky's book, you talk about a minimum. Oh, I forget the exact wording, but it's, like, a minimum this would be, like, the minimum requirement of dressing our kids, like, the shoes might not be we get new shoes every year, or the shoes don't have holes, like, no burlap sacks, but you decide, and that's both of you deciding, and it's both your problem, not just the mom, so that's one thing I noticed, and I do see how much admin there is to keep this completely separate and they're married and so technically the things that are they're legally right. I'm not an attorney but just there are joint things that are co-owned so this viewing of things as so separate is not technically real right it's like how they're keeping track but when they've commingled things they're joint assets but I do think the child and this also depends if they have similar incomes and depends on what they've decided is fair, but his child that he has on his own, I think should be separate from their expenses if we're doing, like, completely tit for tat, but I think I would look deeper into why we're doing tit for tat, and there's this feeling that she wants to get money that she's owed, and I think there's something there with that, like, him holding the money and her asking for it, and, so I can definitely see that there's
This
tension there with that.
definitely is like one of those things that you go, the hardest part about the money stuff is like when it's complicated because he's got this other kid with another marriage. So it's like that almost becomes like a shield for not having to talk about it. It's like, well, we can't have it joint because I have a third kid and there's no way to figure that out. So because of that, we're just going to not talk about it and you're going to have this like weird thing with me. Like it feels like that's part of the problem.
Right, and I was also curious when she was talking about the feasts, because this can happen in 2 different ways, like, he did all this spending. Was her and the kids, were they brought along for the fun, and because it was his choice, she felt like it was his spending, or is, like, he going alone on
Right.
feasts on vacation? Like, I think sometimes this happens even with friendships. If someone makes a lot more money and they, like, wanna go to the fancy hotel when they're on a trip, and you don't need that, but, like, they want to, so how do you navigate that if you can't afford it or don't wanna spend on that? And so that reminded me of this where he's, like, going to these feasts, but I'm assuming she went too, but maybe she wouldn't have chosen that, so it felt like his spending.
Let's do one more email. I love that perspective because like that is the feast, you're like, okay, well, you ate, you enjoyed it. Like it goes back to like the kids, like they're your kids. You might not care about burlap sacks on their feet, but yeah, at a certain point, you do want your kids to have shoes, right? Like you did eat and have fun here. Like you could have stopped me before, right? Like these are all things that we're like, we're not stopping it at the where it's the foundation. Like this is all arguments that they're having after the fact that they like got to get in front of.
Right, like, how many nice dinners do we wanna have on this vacation? What are we, spending on gifts? And maybe she feels like she has no control of what
Mm.
he's doing, and he's not listening when she said, "I don't think we should go to the feast," but I think you're right, like, making that plan before or just generally deciding, like, what's important to us about a vacation? Like, is it the activities? Is it we wanna be in a nice hotel? Is it it's about the neighborhood? And there's compromise always because we're going to disagree or have things that are most important to us that will be different, but having that general idea before we go can be really
Okay,
helpful.
I love this question. We're gonna do one more email, and then I want everyone to go follow at the Fiscal Femme. We're here with Ashley Feinstein Gerstley. Go follow. She's fantastic. I love what you're saying here. The money parties is a great idea. That feels very in line with the JTrain universe and advice I've given and not taken sometimes. So I like it. So all right, ready? My sister is getting married next year, and I'm planning the bachelorette party. Probably 10 to 15 women with good jobs, all around age 33. I'm curious about your approach to planning where we stay, more specifically, how to collect money from the attendees. My sister wants Puerto Rico, great, but how do I determine the lodging budget? Do I first collect money from everyone? Do I pick a place, then ask for money later? Do I ask about people's budgets, or do I get a commitment list and then set the budget myself? I know everyone just getting a hotel room would solve this whole issue, but she's set on a big house. I'm trying to avoid putting my card down and chasing people for months. From my experience, whoever fronts the deposit always ends up shortchanged somehow, which is fine, but I'd like to minimize it. Thanks for your honest, practical advice and for always adding levity to any situation, not trying to be cheap, but kind of being cheap. So, what do you think?
Definitely get the money before. So I'd say I think it's on both ends, right? It's so nice as an attendee of a bachelorette, which I love this question so much because she's being so thoughtful
Right.
about it, is knowing what I'm going into. Like more than just the housing. Of course, like the little things, we don't know what dinner will be exactly, but like knowing the kind of restaurants, like are we doing any expensive activities? Um, so I would say it's hard to you can ask about budget in advance, like what people wanna spend, but I think it would be easier to essentially find kind of the house that her sister would love, that she thinks is great, and say, "This is what it would cost," to get an idea and just see how many. I know it's hard to not know if you get an idea of who thinks they can come, but then give them an idea of
Right.
price, then they can fully commit, and then make sure they pay you, before that, like, paying for their piece, at least for those things you've already put down, is your way of having them actually confirm and book, because I think people are, like, excited, they'll say yes, but then when it comes to transfer the money, like, maybe it's a tight month or they forgot about something and and you don't wanna be stuck with that bill. So I think giving a couple options even, or having an idea of what you want and saying, "It'll be this much per person-ish. Are you
To me,
interested?"
every good bachelor party I've gone on had a great itinerary and was a lot of work for someone, not me, but someone had to put
Yes.
work in before the trip to make the bachelor party great. And like, you've written 2 books, Ashley. When you wrote the book, you did the outline first, right? You do that
Yes,
outline and you get
I did.
really in depth with an outline. I think, and then the book kind of flows from there. It's a lot of work after that, but like that outline, that's the spine of that book. And I think like if I was this woman, what you're and I'm not saying it's got to be a big itinerary. Let's call it Thursday through Sunday in Puerto Rico. I'm going to need, and you're doing a house. So like we've decided she wants a house. We're going Thursday through Sunday to Puerto Rico. Get yourself there. That's not her responsibility. So let's think of her responsibilities. They arrive. There's going to be, so groceries for the house, one dinner, one daytime activity. That's what I would count on me doing. So I would say, Friday, we're going to do a beach day. You're on your own. Friday night, we're going to have our big dinner. Saturday, we're having our big boat day. And so and then I would give 3 prices. I think when you give people 3 options, the expectation's set, and then you vote on it as a group. And now when the vote happens and you present, like, it's going to be around, and again, approximations. If we do this house with this boat and these groceries, this is option A. If we do this house with this boat and these groceries, option B. And then option C. And then here are the options for the restaurants that I'm choosing between. This is the nice one, this is the medium one, this is the less one. And if you do that, I think that sets up for all the fun and craziness to happen in between. If you get serious with this itinerary, things are good. And if you vote on it, then people go, if someone loses the vote, now they can go, well, I wasn't comfortable before and I'm still not. So I'm going to gracefully bow out. It seems as though I've lost to the numbers of the group. That's okay. But it gives them an opportunity to do that before people say, and then I have a drop dead date for when you can pay me. Beyond that, we're going to have to make some changes with the house. Like, I think that would set us up for success.
Yes, I love that. And I think it's beneficial for, I know it's a lot of work for
It's so much
the
work.
planner, but the people who are attending, they know going in how much it's gonna cost-ish, which I think sometimes you think, "Oh, just the house and just the flight," and then there's these activities that are hundreds of dollars, and so it can be a shock and it can be
That's where people
stressful.
get angry. They go, well, I didn't know about the boat and I didn't know about the dinner at this nice place. And it's like, no, we're going to find this out before we even go. You're going to be within, if you do it that way, you're basically going to be within $300 of what you end up spending the whole weekend. Like, you can't really get too far away from your expectation.
Yes.
And I think anyone who's spending the 1,500 to go and do the weekend for their friend, which seems like the general kind of price of admission of a travel bachelorette party, is okay with it being 1,600 and not disappointed by the person or feels taken advantage of. I think people feel taken advantage of on these bachelorette parties where they're like, I'm not even a friend. And I thought I was, and it's like, well, let me make the numbers real.
Right, and if you can't go, it's okay, and hopefully that the friend is understanding if someone can't make it. I'm also a big proponent of setting aside money over time for travel, so you could have a fund called the Bachelorette Fund, the
Mm.
Travel Fund, and then the weeks paychecks leading up, putting money aside in there, it's kind of doing it for you if you have to pay. For some things before, but just setting the money aside so that when it's time to book something or time to send the money over, it's there waiting for you and you're not like scrambling, pulling from savings, putting it on a credit card, trying to figure it
This is
out.
why I'm a big proponent of the house for the bachelor bachelorette party. Even there's only one reason I like the house idea is you can be like, and we need a grocery fund, and you go $50 a person for the groceries. And what people don't realize is like everyone talks about how expensive groceries are, but like you get $50 a person from 15 people, you got a good wad of cash. People are going to generally get money back from that. Like, you don't have to spend that all. You can put that towards alcohol. People are going to be like, what? We have all this White Claw? Like people are going to be like more excited and happy with what happened.
Right. Versus like buying the $10 water at
Right.
the hotel.
Exactly. Ashley, this was fantastic. I'm so happy. I'm
So
so happy you
painful.
came on. This was fantastic. Everyone go follow Ashley at the Fiscal Femme. Go buy her books. We got to have you back. This was so great. I'm so happy you could come on.
I would love it. Thank you. This was so fun. And also, I'm working on a new project that I think you all would love. It's called How Do You Afford This? And it's a new handle. And essentially, I've been asking people in the streets how they afford different things. So maybe you and I should go and talk about relationships and how people are affording. I did interview a guy about gifts for his girlfriend and how he was affording it and budgeting for it. But like I've been doing rent, housing, vacations, just shopping. So it's been really fun. And I think it's very helpful because we often compare ourselves with each other and you don't realize like someone had their house paid for or someone is saving up for this and not doing something else. And so it's not it's to show under the hood of like what people are actually spending and how they're affording
I
things.
love that. I definitely would find it funny if someone was like just held up a picture of their parents that are dead. They're like, yeah, this is how the inheritance. That's how, like, oh, okay, cool. We all feel better now. I mean, I think I tweeted
Yes.
something about that subject just being like, there should be some sort of like, we should go to these influencers and just be like, walk us through this. Like like I know what the podcast pays. Why don't you
Yes.
walk us through this? And then just see what happens after that. Like I can tell you there's a lot of influencers that would not go on that show, I think. You might have trouble booking them, but I love this idea. This is great.
I know. I'm curious how many people I would have to do anonymously. But it started because I would just be on Instagram like, how are people doing this? Like, how are they in
Right.
Europe? How do they have a house in the Hamptons? Like, how do they buy $400 shirts? So I'm just curious, and I'm sure if I am, others are too.
I
So influencers would be great because I'm very curious what they're getting free versus what they're spending.
listen, I can't wait to see who says no to this. That's the list I want to see. The no's. Ashley, thank you for coming on. We'll be back next week. Boom.